95% of villagers, avoids using good agricultural land and avoids the loss of amenities for existing residents. This is a brownfield site and has been agreed as such by Swale planners. Importantly, from the parish council, it meets their planning strategy criteria. Reuse brownfield sites, a small-scale minor incremental development, avoids major increase to traffic flow or reduction in road safety, increases local employment opportunities, including home working, avoids areas liable to flood and manages surface water effectively, protects biodiversity, avoids using good agricultural land, offers enhancement of protection to the local landscape, avoids significant impact to light or noise pollution, delivers modern energy efficiency and low carbon homes, contributes to the viability of village services. Lower Halstow is in the process of having the speed limit reduced to 20 miles from 30 miles an hour. Councillor Mike Baldock is working with KCC to achieve this. Swale has not met its housing delivery targets set by the government, so a buffer is required. Swale BC has more than 100 applicants on its self-build register, but has provided less than 1/3 of the plots to meet that demand. The application for a single self-build property that uses an existing access. The site is currently unused, historically being a car park, and is defined as previously developed land, brownfield site as acknowledged by Swale planners. It is opposite the terraced rows of Westfield and Club Cottages that comprise of 28 dwellings, so is not considered isolated in the true sense of its meaning. Beach Lane has a footpath of street lights every 120 metres leading to the village centre. There are many facilities in the village that are within easy walking distance as defined by the national guidelines. As the ward councillor, I fully support this application and ask members to give this due consideration. I will be away, so I cannot be with you.
Right, Councillor Baldock to speak, but I've just got a question for our head of planning, and I think I know the answer before I even ask. But my understanding is that local village strategy from the parish council in planning terms doesn't carry any weight.
That's correct. It's not adopted by the authority.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock. Yes, but I'm going to Councillor Baldock to sit down, ready to go. Sorry. Mr. Elgar, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point of clarification for members' benefit, really. Reference has been made to the cottages at the location, the terrace group of houses. I just wanted to point out, in case it wasn't clear, that the reason why there's a group of houses there is that there was historically a brick making site around those houses, and those would effectively work as cottages for the brick making plant. And as is the case with lots of brick making plants, they were traditionally isolated from sort of villages and towns. So that their isolation is kind of something to be taken into account in terms of the decision to be made on this application. Obviously, if you start developing further houses around those cottages, it sort of can start to cloud an understanding of why they were there in the first place. They've got very low heritage value, but that's the reason why they're there. So I just wanted to point that out in case that's helpful in members' decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I just want to have a look. Oh, we've got it up there. Right. That is the outline for one house. What is the impact on the status of the entire land within the red boundary if we give this permission?
dwelling on that land, then unless it's restricted in terms of where it can go on the sites, which really would be difficult.
And that land would then be classified as residential, and it would be easier to transfer future development onto it.
That would, yeah, so the red line would,
My major concern was the amount of land for one house is quite excessive. Having said that, I also find it hard to believe it's that far from the centre of the village and facilities. There's a lot of housing a lot further away. So whilst we're told that a village plan holds no weight, it may not hold weight with planning officers, planning law. It does give a clear steer as to how the local community feel, the people who will be living with the development. They have decided how they feel development should happen in their village. It may not be of material weight, but when we're weighing things up, I think it's valid that does have does have an impact that we consider it. We're not officers, we're not bound in the same way, so I do think we can consider that. I think backing up what the ward member said, so I think probably both of them, I think a site visit here so you can actually see the land, but also see the relationship between the land and the services would be beneficial. So as you can tell, I am torn on this one. I think it's a large site for one house. But I also feel that it's hard to argue it's that far from the services. So I think I would like to formally propose a site visit, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Bonney. Those in favour? Okay, done. Well, for. Those against? Three against? Abstentions? So that's carried. Application deferred for site meeting. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to go back in time to item 2.1. Tonville Church Road, Tom, and it's 22/501799/12.
Right, thanks, Chairman. As you heard earlier, I've been parachuted in at the last minute to present this. This application is for the replacement of a chain link metal gate that previously existed on this site with a wooden gate of the same size and the addition of a pedestrian gate and a small open block paved courtyard to the front of the property. The building itself here, Tong Mill, it's a Grade 2 listed property within the Tong Conservation Area, and part of the property has been converted to residential use. This is the gate in question. The boundary fence, the chain link boundary fence you can see adjacent to the road has, I understand, been replaced like for like. But what has happened here is that they have replaced a similar chain link style gate with this solid close boarded gate, and the proposal also seeks to create a small area of hard standing in this location here immediately next to the gate. Those are the plans, which are fairly self-explanatory. The area of block paving that's proposed, and you can see the pedestrian gate there that sits next to the planning officer recommendation is for approval. There's no objection from the conservation officer, although the gate and pedestrian gate is a solid structure as opposed to chain link, given the very limited size of the structure. It's not considered that it has any form of detrimental impact on the listed building or wider setting of the conservation area. Therefore, recommendation is that permission is granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Olga, is there anything you'd like to add at this stage, and then you can escape?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think one of the considerations was obviously the two listed mill buildings are at the centre of the conservation area adjacent to the mill pond, and I think there were concerns raised about changing the boundary and how that would impact on views of the mill pond, which is a key feature of the conservation area. And clearly the solid gate that you see in the photo does restrict one particular view of the pond that previously existed. But I think in the overall scheme of things, the appearance of the gate is an improvement over the existing, and there are still available views across to the mill pond from other parts of Church Road. So I didn't feel that we had any real grounds to refuse the application. There's no real there's such a limited harm, and probably the harm that sort of arises from the limitation on one particular viewpoint is probably outweighed, in my view, by the change in appearance and the fact that you still got adequate views of the mill pond from elsewhere. I think there are also some concerns about the hard surfacing in front of the building, and I think overall it's quite a difficult area, and there's it's a very narrow road, and sometimes it's necessary for vehicles, people to kind of duck into that area because of the sort of limited width of the road and the speed that some vehicles. So I can understand the reasoning behind wanting to hard surface the area, and it's quite a, as you can see from the photograph, it gets quite churned up. So I think it'd be difficult to sort of suggest that it's not an unreasonable proposal in the circumstances, and I think it's a sort of fairly sensitive way of dealing with the surface treatment of that area. So I'm entirely comfortable with the proposal, although I do appreciate that some of the neighbours have raised concern, but I'm supporting the officers. I support the officer's recommendation, and subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Members, I just need to, just in case we creep over again, beg your indulgence to extend standing orders. Just one more time. Thank you very much. Wasn't a very enthusiastic agreed. Right, so I move the officer recommendation.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jays, Councillor Bonny, and Councillor Boulder.
This is just outside of my ward, and Tom Pond has been part of a quite considerable discussion over the last few years. I find it a bit surprising that given that this is in the heart of the conservation area, you've got this, we are permitting what is effectively a complete mismatch between solid gates, a solid post, and then chain link fencing. From a purely aesthetic point of view, it seems an odd mix. You know, one is quite industrial, the wooden one about that, but it's not exactly traditional. And as for the hard standing, I am aware that the parish has really suffered from a amount of traffic from the land raising down at, I think it's the golf club, with huge numbers, massive numbers of HGV traffic going down there, and quite obviously causing erosion to the lanes down there. And I can understand the point of view of wanting to put hard landscaping in, but again, going back to the listed buildings and the setting, some of these small green buffers, landscaped areas, which, you know, we have it the same in Rodmersham, do need protecting from quite clearly traffic mounting them, but they do create that contrast in landscaping between the hard and the soft. So I'm slightly surprised that we're going to roll over to, and particularly going back to the solid fencing. There is a vista and a view, and that is absolutely the heart of the conservation area, is the views down to the ponds from different angles. And I am aware that from within the village, there is discord about that mismatch there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock?
There's no nearby pub, so well, I'm still going to call for a site visit. There is, to be honest, my main concern is the block paving. Yeah, the last speaker did mention this. I think it is important that we have those little green grass verges. They do give that traditional feel, but a block paving just simply doesn't. I'm slightly less worried about the wooden gate. I do think if we are going to give permission, I would like to see under condition 3 a maintenance condition, or something that means that they have to be kept black. They're not just painted them and allowed to fade and flicker away. And the informative, I think I'd like the informative to be a condition. That seems to be about protecting the fabric of the mill building. It'd only be necessary if we go through this ridiculous paving bit. But I do think, so I'd like those possibility of those included if we do give permission. But I am concerned about giving permission for the block paved courtyard. So I would like a site visit so that we could put it into context and see whether or not it is something that enhances the conservation area or not.
Site visit, Councillor Bonham? Okay, those in favour? Seven, those against? That's 8 against. Abstentions? Seven. That's also back to the substantive motion, and Councillor Hunt, please.
think that it's interesting, this one, looking at some of the comments. We had earlier complaints that a hedgerow had been taken out, and now we've got complaints that hedgerow is being planted. And I think it just shows the difficulty of planning sometimes. You're never going to please everyone. But this is someone that's taken on this home and looking to make improvements and make it better. I see no problem with it. We have got the block paving, but I think we have to take comments from the conservation officer that does look at that. And on page 56, the surface treatment will at worst represent a neutral change to the character and appearance of the conservation assets in the two listed mill buildings, but it without doubt provide more practical surface for the homeowners, which would be easier to maintain. And where we've seen that photo of all the mud and everything that's there, it's not really a green area, it's just a bit of mud that people rode over. So I think that these bricks, if they're done in the right type, which we have got in here, it will be, as the conservation officer said, modest visual enhancement. I mean, this is someone just improving their home, and we should agree.
On to the vote as amended, yes?
In relation to condition 3, we can add that the gates are painted black within 6 months and maintained as such thereafter. In terms of the informative, we could convert that to a condition that requires a set distance, if you can leave that for officers to discuss with the conservation officer and agree a small gap that.
Happy with that? So those in favour of, yes, James, I saw your hand throw up. Oh.
Just
Yeah. Can we go, yeah? Conditions? Those against? All abstentions, so it's been 0. The permission is granted subject to the issue of decision notice and the medical conditions. Thank you, members. Right, finally we're on to part 5s. And the first one obviously is 5-1, the Station Street. Any comments? Review?
It was an outline, although that condition had been put forward, and the inspector obviously still considered the principle of whether we had the ability to impose a percentage. And we've got a mix of different decisions that have been coming through. That some where inspectors have imposed the condition. I can think of one that was reported to members last time round, where an inspector included the condition. And then we have others like this one, where an inspector has said that we don't have the ability to impose that specific percentage. And of course, we also have the rising loan to that condition out as well. It continues to throw up different decisions.
Come down for a chat. I just think that there is all these different appeals, but we need to, as a council, come up with what we're actually going to do on each application. If we're going to go for 50%, it should be on every single application that we put forward and make sure that it's there when it does come through on the reports. If we're not going to do it, then don't put it. But we need to be making sure that everything is consistent and we either do it or we don't. That's what I'm trying to get at. That it's no good just saying some appeals do, some appeals don't. We need to be clear.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, I found that one quite disappointing. Yeah, please. Right, 5-1, as I said, I found quite disappointing myself, to be honest. But 5-2 that we're about to hear, not so. I was absolutely overjoyed by this one, and as it's on your patch, Councillor Jones, I'll let you lead off on this one.
Thank you, Chair. I attended the
Sit there, please.
one loud enough.
No. Thank you very much. And I endorsed all of those comments about the officers and the way in which they put that together. And I'm going to invite our head of planning as well now to make a comment on it.
Thank you, Chair. The only comment I would make is I think the decision notice from the inspector is useful.
Hunt?
Can I make a comment as well on the?
No.
It was just to say it's a really good example. Applying the tilted balance and looking at, you know, obviously when you don't have a 5-year housing supply, countryside is vulnerable. And if you shut up shop and say no to everything, it becomes difficult to defend that as a matter of principle. But when you can really identify what the particular positive characteristics of a site are, and in this instance, it was the location of the site on the slopes, the mixed slopes, the high visibility of the slopes, the really panoramic views that you get from the site, and the sense of the experience of you. Undeveloped site at the moment, you know, those were really strong key points. Even though the landscape isn't formally designated, you know, that was enough to persuade the inspector that harm outweighed the benefits.
Exactly what I was going to say. I did want to say that we have to make sure that as a committee, it is a very specific reason why that was, and it is officers gave it recommended refusal. It's not a case of officers have said that it should be approved. It's always been the case that should likely to be refused and the appeal wouldn't be won. And I think that's something that we need to take as a committee, that don't get complacent and think, oh, actually, we can just refuse everything now, because it has that specific reasons why that one was won, and there may be others, especially in that area, that we aren't so lucky on.
And who knows, on another day. Would be it, we normally do on part 5s.
Exactly the point that you just made, Mr. Chair. Something like this on an appeal against non-determination with tilted balance in full swing, that a different inspector on a different day would have made different decisions. The officers were the ones who put in the reasons for refusal, and we voted on. The only other point I would pick up
I was quite heavily involved in this case because I dealt with the Section 106 agreement, which we didn't have until about 3 weeks before the hearing, maybe even less than that. And we actually produced a completed unilateral for the appeal. So to remember that the inspector's decisions will vary. But I think I would agree with the head of planning that there is a lot to take from this, because the reasoning was so strong. And I think, you know, the points inspectors made that they're not benefits, they're not goodies, they don't necessarily get weighed in that sort of harm versus benefits balance because they're there to mitigate the development. We sometimes fall into the trap of, well, it's nice because we're going to provide £750,000 worth of contributions. That's necessary. That's not a good.
Please don't. Please don't. And just to round off finally,
Yeah. Bob was quite new to this and picked it up really well. And I was going said, when the developers weren't particularly helpful in getting the information, but yeah. As the inspector.
and I'm just, you thought you had the last word, but I will let Cheryl have the last word.
Its point, the reason that it took so long to determine from the date that it was due to the date it was actually at committee was, if I understand correctly, due to a number of being made over and over again to try and to get it to a point where, in officer's view, it was for you to give consideration to. Before that, it just wasn't even considered to be ready. And it got to that point, and then they said, we're going to. But it wasn't that, it was just sort of tardiness in the work of officers. It was actually the opposite.
Yeah. Just before I close the meeting, we'll email out to you as soon as we can date for the site meeting. We also graciously voted for. And thank you all for indulging us this evening. So it's been a long one again. And safe journey back for everybody.